Tasting Climate Change wishes to thank all of the sponsors supporting the conference. This specific seminar is made possible by the moderator for this seminar is Michel Bouffard. Michel is the founder of Tasting Climate Change, an author, a wine educator, and a journalist. She recently co-wrote a book called Quel vin pour demain, which was published last September by Duno. The book explores solutions for the wine industry to adapt and mitigate climate change.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And today is the fourth day of the third edition of Tasting Climate Change. I'm quite excited about today's topic, and some people were emailing me asking, why did you choose rosé of all style of wine? Actually, this idea came about and 3 years ago. I went to Provence, and there was an international rosé symposium. And the symposium was over a few days, and they had brought people from all over the world to discuss the future of rosé in regards to climate change. And I was quite fascinated by all of the research being made around the topic. And so I decided that to make a seminar out of it today. So I really thank Vins de Provence for making this possible. And with me to go over this fabulous seminar, I have three brilliant speakers, all living in the region of Provence. Before I present them, I just want to remind you a few details. Many of you have emailed us asking until when the seminar will be available online. So you have access to the recorded seminars until December 30th. If you want to share what you've learned today, we are on Instagram, Tasting Climate Change, hashtag Tasting Climate Change. At the bottom of your screen, you have a little chat box. We invite you to ask questions. Throughout the seminar, I will look at the questions and I will make sure that I answer the questions. I ask the questions to the panelists. If we don't have time to answer all of the questions, we're taking notes of the questions being asked, and what we're going to be doing over the next few months, we'll be answering them on Instagram and to continue the discussions around the solutions to adapt and mitigate climate change. So today with me, first of all, I have MATTHIAS BOUGREAU. MATTHIAS is a qualified enologist and doctor of food science. Dr. MATTHIAS BOUGREAU worked as a consultant enologist in the Languedoc, and then as a teacher and researcher in enology and sensory analysis at the University of Texas Tech in the United States. Since 2009, he has worked as enology project manager for Institut Français de la Vigne du Vin at the Center of Rosé in Villeurbanne. His research themes focus on the innovation processes in rosé winemaking following the sector's evolution, such as the reduction of sulfites and chemical inputs, organic and physical methods, and the control of critical points, such as management of oxygen and evolution in bottles. I also have with me ALEXIS CORNU. ALEXIS is, since 2016, he's the talented man who's been officiating as the cellar director and enologist for the MDCV group. So at Château de Berne, UP, l'Ultimate Provence, Château des Bertrands, Château Saint-Roux. He is also the architect of no less than 10 cuvées, including organic wines. He has a master's degree in environmental biology at the University of Bordeaux, and also holds a diploma in viticulture and enology from Montpellier Sup Agro. ALEXIS actually has traveled all over the world, but he's from Provence, loves it. And so he came back to Provence and he embraces the eco-responsible project guided by the rhythm of the season. And we'll talk with him today about how to look at the hybrids, but also the existing grapes already in Provence that people can use to adapt to climate change. And last but not least is LAURENCE BERLEMONT. Laurence is native of Aix-en-Provence, and she did a short stint in Champagne at the Comité Interprofessionnel, and then at Lafitte in Pauillac. But despite of this, she was eager to come back to Provence, and she is now working in Provence. In 1996, Laurence created the Cabinet d'Agronomie Provençale, and then in 2001, Provence Agro Services. Today, she manages a team of 35 employees, including 12 consultants. And she serves as a taster for the Conseil Oléicole International since 2001 and as the land and agricultural expert since 2008. I'm really excited to have Laurence because we've talked about many things, but one of the things she'll be talking about is cover crop and also lithophaire. But I would like to start with Matthias. Matthias works at the Centre du Rosé, and the Centre du Rosé has done a lot of research how to adapt to climate change in the winery. You've done a lot of research, but a lot of the research you've done is in the winery. So Matthias, I leave the floor up to you to share with us some of the research that you've been doing over the last years.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me to this meeting. It's really important for us in Provence to talk about the challenges in climate change. Basically, we all know that what is going on with climate change. You know, we see a rise in temperature, really extreme temperature too, low and high. Fewer rain during the summer, which is the period where the vine needs water the most. But we also see not only high temperature and lower rainfall, we also see some spring frost more and more that actually can damage the vine. And sadly, we've seen also more recently more and more fires going on in the area. So what is happening to the vine is actually a shift in ripening. So there is a kind of a distinction now between the technological ripening and the phenological ripening of grapes. So what is happening is that the grapes are fuller with sugar and have lower acidity more quickly, but they tend to not reach a good phenological maturity. So obviously, more sugar will mean a rise in alcohol, so more alcohol in the wine, and lower acidity. So basically, the challenge is with climate change in Provence and for rosé wine is to adapt and lower yields and change in quality. So more alcohol, less acidity, and change maybe also in typicity, so different aromas. So at the Center for Rosé Wine, we are working on a lot of different topics. One of the most important is actually keeping the typicity, the typicality of our Provence rosé wine. So the typicity for Provence rosé wine, what does that mean? That actually means high acidity. So you understand really quickly that this is an issue with climate change. Our wines are high in acidity, but brings a lot of freshness. They are fruit forward. They are what we call thiol forward, you know, so those citrusy or passion fruit, tropical fruit that are really rich from the consumer side. They are fine wine. They are easy drinking wine, but they are still really complex and still really opulent. So there are a lot of ways to actually keep that typicity and typicality. You know, we can adapt the viticulture practices and we can adapt the winemaking techniques. In a broader view, we are working on a lot of varietal breeding. My colleagues are going to talk a little bit more about that later. But we work on a lot of different grapes that could be more suited to be grown in the next 50 years or even earlier. So that actually can be an issue. I will be then more talking about what we do on actual varieties. So typicity means close related varieties. We have varieties such as Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault, Rolle, which are the most important grapes we have. And so those grape variety actually brings the typicity of the wine. So when we work with that, with new varieties, we need to still have close related ones. Excuse me. So we have both vineyard work and winery work, I was going to say. We worked a lot on irrigation. So we know that's not a long-time solution for the environment. We cannot use more and more water, but we can use it more efficiently. So there was a previous panel discussing about irrigation and water management. So I'm not going to talk about that. But more recently, we have been working a lot on shading. We use shadow nest, ale nest, because ale nest actually protect from air, but they also protect from the sun, from sunshine. Natural shading with different vine training, agroforestry, and we used also recently solar panel. So solar panel that are installed above the vines. So all those different shading patterns lead to a shift in maturity. So the grapes get less heat, less sun, and so they can ripe in a longer time. Then there is varietal choices, as I was saying. So we need varieties, if new or even really old varieties that are more resistant to drought, to some disease. Also maybe more resistant to fire. As I was introducing, we have seen some really bad fire this year in the area. And we know in California, in Australia, there's been a lot of work going on because it was an issue since even longer than us. But we know now that some varieties are actually maybe more resistant to fires because of the structure of their skin, for example. Then we have modulation of fruit and leaf report, so cutting more leaves to adapt to more heat. We worked also on cover crops, but my colleague is going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So that's kind of the big picture of what we are doing at the Center for Rosé Wine in terms of vineyard adaptation. Then we have all the winemaking adaptation. So we need to face that maybe we will see some grapes when you harvest the grapes. So they will be higher in sugar content and with lower acidity. So there's been a lot of work on previous years about acidification, like chemical acidification or physical techniques, things such as reverse osmosis or ion exchange. So either to bring down the sugar content or to bring up the acidity content. But now we turn on more natural winemaking techniques. The reason is it is better for the environment, obviously, and consumers are looking for more natural product, and producers are looking for more natural product. And so we turned ourselves to new yeast strains, for alcoholic fermentation, and especially on non-Saccharomyces yeast. So that was the part of my PhD dissertation when I was working in Texas, and I'm still really amazed working on those strains. And one particular strain, which is LAURENCE thermotolerance. So this is really a good candidate for climate changing and for the future for wines, because it brings natural acidification and brings down alcohol. The way it does it is that LAURENCE actually transform some of the sugar into lactic acid. So actually bringing down the sugar content for alcoholic fermentation and bringing up the acidity. So we've seen that those strains have actually good effect also on palatability, on the sensory properties of the wine, and also a good effect on color. So we have some more red, pinkish wine because of the higher acidity actually. So those are really good candidates, and those are really important for future winemaking. So they are not used to actually finish the alcoholic fermentation. They are used at first to bring up the acidity and take down a little bit of sugar, and then you finish the alcoholic fermentation using natural, like using normal Saccharomyces yeast. So then we have two enemies for rosé winemaking. So our two enemies are actually heat and oxidization. So for the past years, we've seen that winemakers were using cold temperatures and protecting the wine from oxygen, from oxidization. And what we look for now is using less cold, because cold means energy, and so it's not that good for the environment. But we only have a few parts in the winemaking process that actually need cold temperature. So cold soaking, if you want to do cold soaking, or clarification, and a little bit less during aging. So what we've been working on is trying to see if doing cold soaking, which brings more complexity to the wine, doing cold soaking with higher temperature could bring as much good result as with lower temperature. And so the main word is having sane, healthy grapes. So if you start with healthy material, healthy grapes, you really increase your chances on having good results. Because the problem with higher temperature, if you do cold soaking, is that you might have some microbial issue. But with sane grapes, with really good microbiological care, it's really possible, and we have seen that, we have shown that you can really reach a really good result without having to lower the temperature that much. Then there is a second thing that was actually done for other purpose. It was night harvesting. So night harvesting was at first to bring down temperature. So if you harvest at night, you harvest with lower temperature, the grapes come to the winery at lower temperature. And so it's easier for the pressing and all the pre-fermentary step. But what we've seen is that more than protecting the wine, because it protects the wine also from oxidization, it also jumps off the chart all the chiol precursors. So all the precursors for the aromas that will make passion fruit or grapefruit or citrusy. So that's kind of a big discovery. We've seen that if you harvest during the night, you will have a really high amount of those precursors, while if you harvest during the day, you will lower this amount of precursor. Finally, oxidization and temperature go together. The higher the temperature, the quicker the oxidation goes on. So we have been taking care of that by saying, okay, so let's not use any oxygen at all for a long period of time. So with inert gas at many steps of the process. So just saying, okay, our wine don't really, and must and wine don't really like oxygen. So let's just not put them in contact. Now we see, and we are studying having a little bit of oxygen, but controlling the oxidization, controlling the oxygen that we put into the must and the wine to make actually more stable wine and wine that will be able to age in an easiest way. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I hope you have some question. I guess you have a lot of questions. So
yeah, we have a few questions. So some of them I will keep for the panel, the entire panel.
Sure.
But I'm gonna ask some of the questions right away. So I just want to clarify a few things, Matthias. Some of the stuff you're talking about, I know because I wrote about it in my book, but I know that probably not everyone is familiar with that. So you were talking about the non-Saccharomyces yeast, and I know it's something that I actually talk about in my book, and as a way to deal with a lot of the issues. Can you explain, are those type of yeast you're talking about that you use at the beginning before you use the Saccharomyces, are they also helping you for microbial stability because you're having a higher pH?
Well, not those Lachaussea thermotolerance have not being used as biocontrol.
Okay.
They are really used to improve the quality of the must. But there are a lot of non-Saccharomyces yeast that are used to protect from microbial spoilage, because it's like the oxygen. You know, if you put some oxygen, but you really control what you put into your must, you keep the control. If you put some strain that you know don't have any effect, any palatable effect, you know, any sensory effect, then you control the microbial population, and there will not be spoilage anymore.
Do you find that it's something that I know it's something you've studied, but are you finding that producers in the area are really adopting that, or is it becoming popular?
Yeah, it's becoming really popular, and the reason is we didn't discuss sulfites, but obviously we use sulfite as an antioxidant and antimicrobial. So it has both particularities, but sulfites is also something that we don't want anymore, that consumers don't want anymore in their wine, and that producer don't want to use as much, and even not use sulfites at all. And so those natural bioprotection microorganisms are used more and more because of that, to replace sulfites.
So one of the person we're talking about cold, you know, in terms of keeping the wine cold because you don't want the wine to oxidize. Someone is saying, is geothermy considered to reduce the need of cold? Are you using geothermy at all?
What?
La géothermie, est-ce que tu utilises la géothermie?
We didn't use it. We didn't study that at all. But that's really something we would be planning on studying because that's a process that can be actually pretty important, pretty interesting for winemaking.
We have some winemakers listening, and some people not winemakers but interested. So we have a couple questions for Smoke Taint here. One of the panelists is a winemaker in British Columbia, and they say, we were concerned about smoke taint this year, so we reduced our skin contact time and added a small dose of bentonite to 2 ferments to help reduce the potential for contamination in the finished wine. We had good results with this. Is it something that you are experimenting with as well in Provence?
Yes, so we are working on a lot of different solutions. The tricky part with smoke taint is that you have a part of smoke taint that is actually that you can smell. You know that you can smell some smoke taint aromas, but there is also a part of those particular molecules that are bound to sugars inside the must or inside the wine, and that can unbound at some point. Yeah. So reducing skin contact is obviously one of the a really good way to decrease the extraction. You decrease with smaller skin contact, you decrease the time and you decrease the extraction of those compounds that are actually inside the grapes. So you will have lower quantities of potential contaminants. Using bentonite is also a good way to eliminate those smoke taint molecules. But the issue is with the bound molecules. So the bound molecules are harder to eliminate. So you have a few ways to do that, using enzymes that actually separate the molecule from the sugar, and so you can then eliminate the released molecule.
It's interesting because I've been talking to a lot of winemakers in Australia, in California, in Oregon, and also in British Columbia, because they're, you know, it's something that's pretty much coming now all the time. And some of them were saying there's a way that you can measure, you can know whether, you know, how many compounds bind and unbounded. But they were saying one of the problem is when it comes harvest, the labs are over, there's just too many people wanting to get the wine analyzed. So by the time that you have to make a decision and you get your result, it's a bit too late. And also the delay of analysis, because if you send your wine to get analyzed, it doesn't mean because it's not bounded now, that it's bounded now, that it's not going to be by the time the result comes back. So the delay of the analysis makes it difficult. Have you found the same thing in Provence with this issue?
Yes. So because you have some bound molecules, so the bound molecules actually don't smell anything, but there is a slight change that they will never get released from the sugar, and that you will never see any smell any smoke taint, so burned compounds during the shelf life of the wine. Yeah. So that's there are there is a lot going on in trying to find how to get how to predict from what you have in terms of smoke taint molecules and bound and unbound. But yes, there is a delay because you need to send your sample for an analysis, and what we don't have is being able to know, okay, so I have this amount of bound compounds, so what will happen now? You know, am I at risk, or maybe there is no risk at all? This is highly dependent on what is bound to it. There are more than 7 compounds that are markers for smoke taint, and then there is a lot of different sugar that they can bound to. So that's what we're actually working on that. You know, trying to find the best chemical method to dose. I don't know how to say that.
To dose, like I think
those compounds.
I think Provence Rosé has an advantage on this because, you know, for example, in California with the Cabernet Sauvignon meant to age for 15 years, you know, the wine might not be bounded, that the compound might be bounded, and then, you know, with 5 years in the bottles, then they unbind because they're not meant to drink early in their age. But with Provence Rosé, you know, we want to drink when we know that they can age, but most of them are drunk when they're fresh and young. So I think you have an advantage in the style of wine that you're making, because most wine will be drunk early and fresh, and hopefully when the compound are still bounded.
Well, in a way, it's an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. You know, so some of the smoke-tainted compounds, they are actually compounds that you find in wood, and sometimes, you know, barrel-aged wines actually have some of those compounds. And in red wine, especially red wine aged in barrels, they may be masked a little bit, you know, by the tannins, by the tannic structure, by all the aromas. For rosé wine, those aromas are really not part of what makes Provence rosé wine. Well, for the most of it, you know, the most typical Provence rosé wine will not smell any of those aromas. So they will pretty easily change the typicity, change the identity of the wine.
Makes sense. I have a lot more questions for you, Matthias, but I'm going to go to Alexis, and then we'll come back and have a panel discussion and answer the rest of the questions. Alexis, there's lots of work being done in the region when, you know, to adapt. We're looking at grapes. We're looking at forgotten grapes in the region, existing grapes, but also newly created hybrids, les cépages résistants. You're going to talk about, I think you have a lot of experience with a lot of them. And one of the grapes you were telling me about when we were talking before in the pre-interview, I was quite excited about. So we look forward to learning about that.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for your invitation today to this international meeting. Yes, Provence is quite exciting as a wine region because of the big success of rosé, of course, and a lot of vine growers like Château de Berne or Ultimate Provence and many others are investing a lot in the vineyards in the recent 20 years. The actual taste of Provence rosé, as Matthias explained, is very fruit-forward, pale first, then very intense in flavors, and has a dry, almost crisp, but also silky touch on the palate. And this standard is what our consumers expect. And as the climate is changing, of course, we are all concerned about this style. How can we preserve this style for the next decades? And as a producer, I had a chance when I arrived in Provence. I worked in Provence 20 years ago and worked in the Rhone Valley, and then back to the southern Provence in 2016. And I'm used to deal with the Mediterranean varieties, and to me, you cannot grow any variety anywhere in the world. It's tourism. It's very simple to say that, but of course, depending on where you have your estate, you will have to find first what the best varieties are for your very specific geology and situation. That's a concept of the French concept of terroir. But this terroir concept is, of course, challenged because one of the main factors of the terroir, which is climate, is changing. So I looked for old vines within the Château de Berne estate and the vineyard, and found out an old variety, 1 hectare vineyard within the 150 hectare vineyard. So just an old plot, an old block within our vineyard with an old varieties I did not hear about before, and this is a Rousseli. Rousseli is an example of these old varieties you still can find in many vineyards in Provence, of course, but throughout the world probably. A grape variety which has been disregarded in the 60s and 70s because it was late ripening. It was quite productive, pink or grayish when it's ripe, so not a big red, strongly tainted variety, with a low level of sugar, so meaning low alcohol wines. So in that time, this variety was considered as a bad variety. Now looking back to this variety, now you can understand why it's so relevant to keep this variety and the variety of different grapes in your vineyard. Nowadays, it has been reintroduced within the Côte de Provence because we can keep low alcohol wines, and that's one of the thing we try to manage now. Matthias was talking about varieties, about yeast strains, about winemaking techniques. But I think first, looking at your vineyard and experimenting at a small scale, maybe first different varieties to adapt to this new climate on your place where you live is one thing to do. Plus, this variety Rousseli, probably 1% of the audience today heard about it before. So it's something which is new, and people love new things in the wine industry. So as a marketing element, I think it's interesting too. It's of course not the first element to look at, but it's to consider too. So Rousseli is a really interesting variety to me. It's not a big aromatic variety. It's very good for Provence because we are used in Côte de Provence to blend varieties. And this is a second aspect that is maybe a way to adapt to the new climate we are experiencing in our vineyards. Blending different varieties is a way to resist somehow, to adapt, to mitigate the effects of a global warming. So I think Côte de Provence has always been blending, but it's even more important nowadays to consider the variety of grapes you grow on your vineyard. And of course, talking about grapes varieties, you can talk about clones, and you can talk about rootstocks. And this variety is, to me, again, a way to adapt. Not necessarily on single block you plant in the vineyards, but now we are experiencing in Château de Berne and Ultimate Provence vineyards where we can plant different clones within a single block, just to make sure that at a vineyard scale we have a mean how can I une maturité moyenne.
So an average of average of, you don't want it to be too ripe. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
You want to control the maturity. You don't want it to be overripe.
Yes. I think this is an idea to consider vine growing for the future, not necessarily looking at single varietal blocks in your vineyards, but reintroduce diversity within a block of vineyard. And so this way, all the winemakers over the world are biased because they want the perfect maturity on each grape and each block. But let's consider the way differently and the vineyard differently, and reintroduce this diversity within blocks.
So you're talking about, sorry, I just want to confirm something, Alexis. So you're talking about sélection massale, right?
Yes, but not necessarily. Sélection massale is another way to reintroduce probably old clones. If you make sure you get rid of the main diseases. But you can also use standard clones. Sélection massale is a different thing, probably. It can help you reintroduce diversity, but you can simply consider using different clones or rootstocks within your vineyard.
And just quickly, because we're talking about Rousselli, and I'll let you keep on talking because I want to talk hybrids with you as well. But someone is asking you, is Rousselli, I have two questions about Rousselli. So the first question is it allowed in the AOC, in the appellation d'origine contrôlée? Has it been allowed?
We have a broad range of different varieties within the Côte de Provence. And Rousselli has been reintroduced to reintroduce diversity. But we already have different varieties, which are the traditional Mediterranean varieties, Grenache, Cinsault, Syrah, Mourvèdre, and we have white varieties as well. And we have Tibourin, which is not a very internationally famous grape, but with a strong tradition on the seashore in Provence more. So it's the DNA of Côte de Provence blending.
But I guess the question with Rousselli, the question was, are you like you're saying it's just trying to get revived as a grape that was not used anymore, but is it allowed today? Are you allowed to use that grape in the AOC system? Like est-ce que c'est permis dans l'appellation d'origine contrôlée?
It's just being reintroduced.
So
it was only possible to make vin de pays, IGP, and now it's coming to the level of AOP, of Côte de Provence. Yeah, because of all the work we did on this characterization, identification, micro vinification, to learn more about this variety. Everyone, or the majority of vine growers, forgot what was this variety. And so we had collectively, with Centre du Rosé, of course, with Chambre d'Agriculture du Var, with the Syndicat des Côtes de Provence and CIVP, all collectively, we had to prove that this variety is interesting in blending in Côte de Provence. But it's brand new.
And so if I'm a producer in Provence and I've heard of this grape that's, it's good for the appellation and it's helping in the blend, am I allowed to put as much as I want in the blend? Or it's because I know some of the new grapes getting introduced, there's a limit on how much you can use in the blend. Is it the same thing with Rousselli?
Yes, exactly. We are in France and Provence, but France, and so we have a lot of rules within the AOP system. So of course we cannot plant as much as we want, but still there is some room, even within a strict frame, you know, there is always room for innovation, and there's enough in Provence to play with. Yeah.
And can you think of one of the other questions? I'm just asking as we go because it's like right and what you're talking about, but are there any other grapes like rosé that you found that they were once really, you're talking about Tibourin. I love Tibourin. I'm a huge fan of Tibourin. But my understanding is it was a bit abandoned because it was not really easy to grow. And we have, you know, a producer we know that really has put forward Tibourin, but otherwise it seems to be in small amount. You're finding that Tibourin is getting, you know, some love again? Are you finding other previous indigenous grapes like this, like Rousseli and Tibourin, who are just coming back and being popular again?
There are all varieties. There's a huge diversity of varieties throughout the world, really. So my point was just telling everyone, if we are here to share our experiences, to look at what is growing in the vineyards, all vineyards, and you might find some interesting grapes. Not only all grapes, but you can experience with the new varieties. You talked about hybrids, and we have another example within Provence with a crossing between. It's not a resistant variety, but a crossing between two quite known varieties. Caladoc, for example. Caladoc is a crossing between Grenache, a strong Mediterranean variety now, Grenache, and Côte. Côte is Malbec, same variety, two French names for the same variety. And this crossing between Grenache and Malbec is called Caladoc. And it's a second variety which has been reintroduced in Côte de Provence, or let's say introduced, because it's not an old variety. It has been created in 1958 by the French National Institute for Agronomy, Agriculture, INRA, and it has been planted in several vineyards. And after a few years of experiments, we decided collectively in Provence to introduce this variety in AOP. It's just in a few words to sum up, it's probably as good as a Grenache variety, and Grenache is still the main Provence variety. It's as good, but more consistent in terms of yields, and so it's something big already. And so again, it's very nice to blend, and I'm pretty sure this variety will increase, will be more and more planted in the future. So it's something new, you see, even in the DN, the AOP system, even in the AOP system, you can experiment and bring new things to adapt to the new climate. But also we have to think about the taste of the wines, which is another debate, another topic.
Which we'll talk about, because it's one of the questions we'll definitely talk about it as a panel. I want to leave that question for the end when everyone is there. What's the taste of Provence in the future? Thank you, Alexis. I'm going to go to Laurence and we'll bring you back. Some of the questions I want everyone to take part of the discussion. Laurence, I was quite excited when we first talked. I'm quite obsessed with microbes and all the development that's been being made in the past decades, but I would say it seems like we used to talk about it, but now it's really the topic of the day. Everyone talks about microbes. I was presenting in Dallas a few days ago, and a big part of the panel discussion went to microbes, and everyone is really interested we talk about the concept called l'IFOFER together, which you'll tell us what it is and how it can help to adapt to climate change, and also cover crops. So Laurence, we're all yours.
Hello everyone. Thank you to inviting me tonight or today for some people. Yes, one of the problems of the climate change is the adaptations of the vineyards to this change. And my interest about microorganisms came from the fact I have hired 3 years ago one of my consultants who worked in Burkina Faso and who worked on microorganisms, mostly in vegetables, salads and eggplants. And he told explained me what he has done, and I wanted to try these experimentations he has done on vines. And in fact, I didn't know about it 3 years ago. And finally, I've been very interested on this way of working with microorganisms. And I will try to explain a little bit what it is on the few minutes I have to speak with you. In fact, it's about an ancestral technique which was very used in South America, in Cuba, for instance, where the farmers are using a lot efficient microorganisms. I think in English it's called efficient microorganism, effective microorganism, I think. And in French, we call that l'IFOFER, which is an acronym, in fact, of litière forestière fermentée. The idea is that we all realized that the soil in the forest is a lot more rich and full of microorganisms in forest, better than fields just next door. So the idea is that we are taking part of this l'IFOFER, litière forestière. So in a forest, you have the leaves which are falling down, and little by little are eaten by worms and microorganisms. And these leaves which are eaten are full of yeast, bacteria, and a lot of things that we not exactly which kind of yeast and bacteria, but we know that they are full of them. And so we take them, we add some sugar, and we try to increase the quantity we have, and we spray on all the vegetables or what we have done in the vines. And they are not, when I began to think about it 2-3 years ago, I didn't find any experiments which have been done in the vines, a lot on salads and eggplants, but not in vines. So we tried new experiments, and one of the experimentation we have done, so we began 3 years ago, is to add l'IFOFER in the water. So we tried to water some new plantations, 3 rows with only water, 3 rows with water and l'IFOFER, 3 rows without, 3 rows with, etc., etc., and try to see if there was any difference. And we realized the first year that there was really a difference. We were able to see just seeing the vines, and we took the measurement of the length of the branches. And when we compared the vines which were watered with only water and the vines which were watered with l'IFOFER also, we had more than 30% of length in the vines. So we've done that a second time, so this year in 2021, and we had the same results. So the idea is now, I have hired a new consultant who arrived in January. We will work full-time on this project to try to understand if with the same amount of water, we will be able to have better results, or if we have less water, because the problem is also that in Provence, not all the vineyards can be watered easily, because in some area we don't have water at all, or very, very few quantities. So the idea would be to try to understand if with less water, but added with Lithofer, we would be able to feed and to water correctly the vines.
I just have a quick question here to make sure that we understand. So when you're saying you take the Lithofer and the vine grows longer, so is the goal, because water is rare, is the goal of Lithofer to have more growth even though you have less water? Is it? Just want to be clear on, because you're saying that the vine is higher, but what is the benefit of this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's the first step, in fact, because it was easy to make the measurement. I didn't find any experiments on vines. I wanted to make the first experiment easy to understand, and just first to see if there was an advantage or not. And this summer, I've heard that in certain states in America, it was forbidden to water completely. So I was very scared and concerned about knowing that in certain area, people were not allowed to water anymore at all. And in Centre-Var, where I am living, for the first time, we reached the 3rd level out of 4 in dryness. So we were not allowed to water in my region, in my area, except by night. We were not allowed for a few months to water by day, but only by night. And little by little, I'm very, very concerned that this climate change will make that we will have more and more lack of water. And one of the ideas is that if we have less and less water, what could we do to maximize the value of this water, and try to improve the way we use the small amount of water we will have. So that's the first level, is the growth, because it was easy to measure, in fact. And then we've done 3, in fact, we've done 3 experiments. One on the new vines in a new plantation. One experiment we have done is when you have missing vines in an old vineyard, because when you plant new vines in between 2 old big vines, it's very difficult for the baby vine to find some space to grow. And we know that when you plant a new vines, normally it produces after 3 years, if they are all baby vines and all new. But if you plant a new vines in between 2 big one and old vines, it takes 4, 5, 6 years before this new vine is able to produce. So one of the ideas was, if we help this new vine to grow quicker and healthier, perhaps the Lithofer can help that. And the third experiment we have done is to spray on the leaves, because we know that the farmers in South America are spraying also Lithofer in the water and in the treatments themselves with bouille bordelaise. I'm sorry, I don't know the word in English, but some treatment we are doing in the vines. But for this experiment, we didn't find for the moment any benefits, any improvement. But in the water, it was, to our mind, huge, and huge enough to convince me to hire someone to work full time on it.
Have you, and I don't know how you would measure that, but can you see if it also multiplies the microbe in the soil?
Yeah, we are in the process of that. We are taking, we took, in fact, samples of soil to make some analysis before the experiments, and we will make also after, and also we will make also some experiments where you put pieces of closes in the ground, and after 1 month or 2 months, you measure how destroyed it has been. It's a test which is quite known, where we consider that if a piece of cloth, 10 centimeters, 10 centimeters, where you have poor soil without any microorganism, and the same one in a soil with a lot of microorganisms, the piece of cloth will be eaten by the soil, destroyed by the soil a lot more quickly. So we will also do these experiments next year for the next vintage.
I think it's fascinating because we with the first day we had a seminar on regenerative agriculture, and how there's a lot of work being done right now in terms of trying to know, if you have a healthy soil and you have more microbes, then the soil actually traps more CO2 in the soil. And so there's a lot of, and it's complicated to measure how much CO2 is trapped in the soil, but there's a lot of research being done right now by multiple universities and producers leading that. And also the type of cover crop related to the carbon sink. So it'd be very interesting if you could get with those university or those people to see if you could measure how much how much more microbes you have in the soil when you use Lithofair, and then if it helps to sink more carbon, because I think that's really, really interesting. The other question I have for you was when you're talking about you add sugar. So you add sugar and it just basically ferments. How long do you let it ferment for?
More or less 1 month. We put sugar. Sorry, I have some notes for the translation. Starch, which is amidon, and whey, which is petit lait, and water. So we are adding all these components in a biofermentor, a kind of big cook, and which is allow us to grow this Lithofair we took in the forest. And also something I didn't say is that certain people, in fact, are creating. You can buy, in fact, microorganism on the market, on the internet. You can buy microorganism which is already done. But one of the idea is to say that we think that if you take the Lithofair from the forest, which is just next door, just the field, just near your field, the microorganism you will take in the Lithofair will be already adapted to your terroir. If you buy a microorganism and Lithofair, which coming, if you are in Provence, if you buy Lithofair which is coming from Bordeaux or Burgundy, okay, a part of the microorganism will be adapted, but not all. And we think that it's a lot more efficient to make his own Lithofair of the field just next door. So you take Lithofair 10 meters or 50 meters from your field, and then you create your own microorganism blend, in fact, to try to restore the quality and the life in your field. Which we suppose, because in fact the phenomenon is very old, but not very well studied. So the farmers in South America, as I understood, in certain areas, they do that, And for them, it's normal. They don't want to make experiments. They say it's working. We know that for years and several generations. For them, it's obvious. We don't know exactly how it works. And I'm sure that some university and some researchers will find which yeast exactly it is, or which blend of bacteria is working, or which symbiosis, because we think that it's a kind of symbiosis which permits to the vines or to the plants in general to use better the water we gave them. If they have better, if they are better installed in the ground and in the soil.
And have you been in touch with some of those producers in South America? Because they're experiencing climate change, and there the water is also becoming, the snow is melting on the Andes. It's becoming very difficult to have access to water, and the level of salt in water is really high. So they're dealing with climate change. Have you talked to them to see whether if people that were using Lithofert were actually better, it was adapting better to those challenges?
Yeah, in fact, not personally, but the consultant who I work with, who came with this technical and worked with them for several months, and he did the experiment with them. And he told something funny. He told me that his problem was that, in fact, he didn't want to make experiments when he wanted to put on spot some Lithofert and in a spot not Lithofert, in order to compare. They didn't want to compare. They said, no, we want to put Lithofert everywhere. We don't want to test because we know it's working. So his biggest difficulties is to oblige them not to put some Lithofert in certain area to compare, which was a bit funny. And also I tried to make this experimentation in the vineyards, and also I have an activity in vegetable gardens. But the guys in the vegetable gardens stopped the experiment because after 2 months, they said the result is so obvious that we don't want to make experiments anymore. We want to do it. So I stopped for the vegetable garden because they didn't want to do it, because it's a lot of work to make experiment. And that's why I am hiring a new consultant to do that only, because it's a big job. And for the 2 past years, it has been done by my consultant, which it was a job on top of their existing job. So some of them didn't have time to do it. In the vineyard, we were very surprised, and as it was not known at all, my consultant in the vines were very happy to follow the tests to understand the difference. But in the vegetable gardens, they said, no, we do all the vegetable garden, all in Lithofert.
Wow, it's quite fascinating. I just want to bring everyone. We have 20 minutes left, and I just want to make sure that we have time to have some conversation with everyone on the panel. So if we could see everyone on the screen right now, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So one of the questions I have for you is, obviously climate change, no one wants climate change. It's not something that's positive. Elevated CO2 in the atmosphere is not something that's good, but it is changing. And, even though we're trying to find ways to adapt and mitigate climate change, is also a point of non-return. We're never going to go back to what it was before. It's already changed too much. We're just trying to play catch up. The world has turned to Provence style rosé. Everyone wants to imitate it. It's loved. You've done an amazing job in terms of showing the world how rosé can be high quality, how it can be delicate. It's a very specific style. People have loved it so much that everyone are trying to imitate that style. Sometimes I wonder, instead of trying to find all of those ways, and of course I understand if the pH is higher, you need to deal with microbial solutions, but should we maybe sometimes accept that the typicity of Provence rosé will change, and we need to find a way to accept that and communicate a new style of Provence rosé, or should we keep on hanging to the hope that we will continue to make that same style?
To my mind, I think that, I am a consultant in enology for 25 years in Provence, and it already changed a lot these 25 past years. So of course we are used to the wine we have now. So we said, of course, it's the best one because it's what we know now. But I guess that it will change because everything is changing, and we will little by little accept this change, because we will change a little bit the grape variety, because we will change a little bit techniques, because we will, etc., etc. And the climate change will oblige us to change a little, perhaps more quickly. But change is life, to my mind.
I see both Alexis and Matthias nodding, so curious to see what your perspective is on this.
Yeah, I totally agree with Laurence. That's true that maybe 15 years ago, the style of Provence wine was totally different. We were more, well, wines were a little bit darker first. They were still fruit forward, but more on the amylic side, such as English candies. Then they kind of shift to the thiol side, so grapefruit and tropical fruit. Now we know that it's more complex than that it's a mix of both of them. So it really changed that much, in a small period of time. And it's always changing, and it's always adapting to the changes, to the consumer, to new ways of winemaking. There have been a lot of easier and easiest way to make wine, some stronger equipment, for example. And now what's difficult is to predict what is going to change, to say, okay, we need to work on that because we want to change that in the future.
Alexis? Oh, I think your microphone, you need to turn on your microphone.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the taste of the wine has changed a lot throughout ages, centuries, and talking about Provence, as Laurence said, in the last 20 years, we had a big revolution in the taste, in the profile of Provence. We are very happy with what we achieved, and we try, I think, collectively to stick to this style nowadays. But individually, in each estate, of course, we experiment a lot. If you are not experimenting, you are not going forward. You are, like on a bicycle, you are falling. And collectively with Centre du Rosé, for example, we are, of course, experimenting and keeping our eyes, ears, and taste buds open to what's happening in the wine world. So will the taste change? Probably, as Laurence said, it's life, and at least we try to be distinctive and to keep a distinctive style. Every vine grower and winemaker in the world probably should look at its own identity, style, and not looking for Coca-Cola wine, for example. It's not, sorry, I do drink Coca-Cola too sometimes, but I mean, we don't want a standard everywhere and the same wine everywhere. And even in a climate change period, we probably should to look after distinguished wines, elegant wines, and not everyone's wine. Well, Provence has proved in the last 20 years that we could reinvent the wine through an old, very old color of wine. But the new rosé is a kind of big revolution, like the new claret centuries ago. So we'll keep on experimenting for sure. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to revisit the typicity of Provence rosé in 10 or 15 years from now, as we start to introduce new techniques in the winery and in the vineyard. I have a question here for Laurence that I missed when you were talking. Someone was asking when you were applying the water, when you spray for the leaf of fat, at which time of within the growing season you're doing that?
At the moment, the experimentations we have done on leaf of fat is mostly in baby vines. So all during the season, because it's in order to make them grow the 3 first years. So I've done the experiments in new vines which are not producing at the moment. Generally speaking, people can water the vines not too late in the season. As soon as the vines are becoming black, and after veraison, we stop watering. So during the first part of the season of the vines.
There's a question for everyone here, and this is something interesting. Here's the question is in French, I'm just translating. Is the pressure, so you know, Provence is becoming very, it's a popular destination where we're building more and more. So is the pressure of building new building and houses, does it have an impact, a climatic impact on competition for water and also pollutions? And you know, you kind of, as we're kind of building more, are we diminishing the barrier with the fires? So it's a lot of things within that question. So the first one is, are we finding that as we keep on growing the cities and the cities expanding, are we, you know, is there more competition for water? And, you know, between the need of the population and the need from you to irrigate? That's the first question. And the second question is, as we keep on building more, are we diminishing the barrier for the fires to get to the vine?
Yes, there are
big
many
questions.
many questions. Laurence, you.
Yes, I can say a word. In fact, in Provence, we have the chance that the administration is very protective against constructions. So in fact, everybody's thinking, not everybody, but a lot of people think about Provence, thinking about Saint-Tropez and the seaside with a lot of people. But in fact, Provence and Var, which is the center, one of big part of Provence, Var is the most woody department of France. So the big surface we have are forests, in fact, more than cities and vines. And for fires, it's in fact kind of a problem, because we have the big fire we had, which was 7,000 or 8,000 hectares of forest which burned, have burned in parts. So I don't want to be too, it was a big discussion in the area, but one of the theory that I agree with is that the forest is so big and with not enough vines in the middle and not enough cultivation in the middle, which make that from a cigarette along the motorway, the fire went through 7,000 hectares of forest without being stopped, because mostly it was only forest. So it's never all black or white. So it's not the only reason, and I don't want to say something too simple, but it's a part of the problem. We don't have enough vines, I think, in the middle of the forest. And for the population and the cities extent, I'm not a specialist, but for me, what I see in Var, perhaps it's not the same in Bouches-du-Rhône or the department just next door, but in Var, the administration is protecting so strongly the constructions that we have not a huge problem that we can see in the United States, for instance, or in some other area. I don't know what you think, Alexis and Matthias.
I just want to add quickly to that. I think a lot of people don't realize that vines are actually a fire barrier, right? The vines often stop the fire. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. So I just really want to emphasize on that from that question that came in, because I think people forget that. It's the smoke thing that's a problem, but often the vines actually stop the fire.
Yes, exactly. As Laurence said, we experienced, unfortunately, lately wildfires, and we are very close to a national park, and within this park, the vineyards were considered as not welcome, let's say, because not wild. And we experience, unfortunately, again, that if you try to keep a whole area without any planning of the land, then you might have a big problem like this huge wildfires. So vines, are really stopping, and I can tell you, I saw it. Of course, there are smoke taints problems, as you mentioned, but the fires were stopped by the vines. And as Laurence said, we are quite fortunate because of this big forest we have in our region. So pression immobilière is not that big, except on the seashore. We are at Château de Berne. We are owning a very big estate in terms of forest too. And we are getting rid of part of the pine trees to promote, let's say, the oak trees, and to try to lower the risk of wildfires. Just trying to manage the forest too.
I just want to take, I'm just concerned, looking at the time here, there's just a few more questions I want to make sure we get to. And this is not related to climate change, but this is an interesting question. So it's a producer asking the question. It says, many countries and producers are copying the light color Provençal style. To what extent is that a threat for the region? How can the region adapt and improve in order to stay in front of the other competitors?
It's always the problem to be the first one. You have to keep your first position. I think, in fact, is the complexity of the wine makes that the rosé wine in Provence is the rosé we know because of the variety, because of the terroir, because of the climate, and all these things are so complex that it's not so easy to have all the parameters exactly the same to make exactly the same wine. Some area arrive, and some producer arrive to make very good rosé abroad, but it's not so easy to make exactly the same. And of course, it's a threat. Of course, we look at it because we know that everybody wants to copy, but it's a good sign that people want to copy you. A way of staying in front is to continue to make experiments and to continue and to keep the advantage we have to always make more, because there is an expression in French, we say, si tu n'avances pas, tu recules.
If you don't move forward, you're going back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have to go forward.
Yeah, we've seen for the past 20 years. So 20 years ago, Provence wine were already the palest wines in the world, and then you see that in the last 20 years, they became paler and paler. But you know, everywhere in other French areas or everywhere in the world, wines were getting paler and paler.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's a semi-thread, because you can actually get the same color, but you will not get the same aromas from it. So it is a thread, because color is really important for rosé consumers. You know, that's the first thing you see when you buy something. But if you see something that has the color of Provence rosé, but when you taste it, it doesn't taste at all like we define the rosé traits. You know, it's not a real threat, because you know it's not a Provence wine. So we work on that, because we want to be still the first, and we are the image of rosé wine around the world, which is good. That's why people want to have the same color, and that's why people want to have the same aromas also. But it's way easier to get the same color than to get the same aromas.
We have 3 minutes left. So I just want to, if you could tell me in a few words. We talked about the typicity keep on changing over the years, and we're just going to accept that, and it's already changed. So to conclude, if we look at Provence in 20 years from now, with the climate change that we're experimenting right now and all of the research you're doing, what do you think, as we continue to evolve, what will Provence rosé look like in 20 years from now, Matthias?
Well, I would say it will look like the best area for rosé wine.
Okay, so we'll continue to do the best place. It's going to change. You don't want to talk about what it might taste like. It's just going to continue to be the best.
Yes.
Okay. Laurence?
I think one of the direction we can go through is to manage to maintain the degree, the alcohol contents not too high, because it's a demand of the consumers. So as it's a demand of the consumers, I guess the producer will work on it. So in this big change we have to face, I think people will try to maintain, and we saw in the few past years some rosé at 14 or 15 potential degree, and that's not too much accepted by the consumers. So I think that if change there is, the maintained degree, not too high, not too low neither, but not too high, will be one of the road, I think.
It's something I think that anyone in a warmer region it's definitely a challenge for sure.
But we don't really know what consumer will want in 50 years. Maybe they will want
That's
some
right.
strong wines.
Perhaps.
There's one thing that I love, Coco Chanel, she said, there was a say in French, jamais à la mode, jamais démodé. Never in fashion, never unfashionable. And I like that, because I think there's always going to be trend, and the consumer will change. But I think if you have a classical style, it never goes out of fashion. And I think it always lasts the time, and people always go back to that. I really believe that. As much as I love the trend and new things that comes on in the market, I think the classics always are there to stay. Alexis?
Very nice quotation, Michelle. And I only can agree. It might not be noticeable on the taste, quoique. But I think in 20 years, Provence will be greener. And so it would mean that Provence will take its part of bearing the burden of climate change and trying to change the way to produce, to grow the grapes and produce the wines. And we are going forward in this direction, not necessarily just organic, but finding new ways to produce. L'IFOFER, as Laurence explained, using mulch cover crops is very important too. And instead of using mineral fertilizers, for example, well, many things are happening now, and I'm quite excited to see in 20 years how we will produce the wines. But I agree with you. We stick to an elegant, fine style we have now.
I think it's a very good way to end, because I've seen the change in Provence and the growth in organic and sustainable vineyards. And I really believe that if we're more sustainable in the vineyard, then the vine is going to be stronger to adapt to what's coming. It's like us. If we're healthier, we have more chance to resist a virus. And I think that the growth in organic and sustainable movement in Provence that we continue to see, I think it bodes well. And in that coupled with all of the research that you're doing and you're sharing also, we didn't talk about that, but I know that the Centre du Rosé, in Provence, does a lot of work with other regions as well to kind of learn from that. So I want to thank you, everyone. Today, it's lots of interesting discussion and lots of solution offered to preserve that delicious style of fresh rosé that we like. And I don't know, I might not be here in 40 years from now to see what the wine will taste, but I have no question about the future of the region. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, just a reminder, all of the seminars are available online until December 30th. So if you've missed some of them, you can watch them on your own time. We know that the time zone doesn't work for everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much.